Welcome to her new peak. Subscribe for stories of growth, resilience, and new beginnings. Chapter 1. Adrian Vale laughed into the microphone in front of 400 guests and said his bride would never leave him because she had already wasted 7 years loving him. The ballroom went quiet for half a second, the kind of silence that made silverware sound cruel against porcelain. Then a few men at the investor table chuckled, unsure whether the groom was joking or testing them. Adrian leaned back in his chair with the careless confidence of a man who believed every room belonged to him. His tuxedo was perfect, his smile expensive, and his hand rested on the bare shoulder of the woman sitting beside him. That woman was not his bride. Vanessa Hart stood at the edge of the head table in her simple ivory rehearsal dress, one hand still holding the folder of wedding schedules she had personally revised for 3 sleepless nights. She did not move when the laughter spread. She only lowered her eyes to the glass of champagne in front of Adrian and watched the bubbles rise as if they were the last small living things in the room. Adrian lifted his glass toward her. "Come on, Vanessa. Do not look so wounded. Everyone here knows you love me. 7 years is a long investment. You are not walking away before closing day." The woman beside him, Camille Rosier, covered her mouth with 2 manicured fingers. The gesture was supposed to look embarrassed, but the diamond bracelet sliding down her wrist did not know how to be modest. Vanessa recognized that bracelet. It had belonged to Vanessa's mother, and it had been locked inside a velvet box in Adrian's penthouse safe until 2 weeks earlier. Camille noticed Vanessa's gaze and turned her wrist slowly under the chandelier light. Adrian said family jewelry should be worn by the woman who represents his future. There were many ways a heart could break. Vanessa had learned most of them during 7 years with Adrian Vale. A heart could break quietly in a hospital corridor when a man promised he was working late and his cologne came home with someone else's perfume. It could break during charity dinners, during postponed birthdays, during nights when she sat alone with cold soup because Adrian had a crisis, always too important to include her. But that night, in the grand ballroom of the Lucent Crown Hotel, her heart did not break. It finally stopped begging. Adrian mistook her stillness for surrender. He always had. He looked toward the guests and smiled wider. "She is sensitive. That is one of the reasons I keep her close. A woman like Vanessa makes a man look stable." Camille laughed softly, and a little obedient. Vanessa's fingers tightened around the folder. The old Vanessa might have swallowed the insult because Adrian had a board meeting in the morning. The old Vanessa might have told herself that public dignity mattered more than private truth. The old Vanessa might have remembered the boy who once waited outside a library in the rain with cheap coffee and a paper bag of croissants before ambition polished him into something sharp. But the old Vanessa was not standing in that ballroom anymore. She looked past Adrian, past Camille, past the guests who had suddenly become fascinated by their plates. At the far end of the room, near the service entrance, a silver-haired woman in a black suit gave Vanessa one small nod. Marianne Bell, senior counsel for the Hart family office, had arrived. Vanessa set the folder down on the table. Adrian raised an eyebrow. "Do not make a scene." "I was about to say the same thing," Vanessa said. Her voice was quiet. That was why the room heard it. Chapter 2. 7 years earlier, Adrian Vale had not been the kind of man who laughed at women into microphones. He had been 28, brilliant, hungry, and almost broke. His first medical technology company had a patent dispute, 3 unpaid engineers, and a pitch deck full of promises he could not yet afford to keep. Vanessa met him at a university alumni fundraiser where he spilled black coffee on the sleeve of her blue dress and spent 10 minutes apologizing with such intense embarrassment that she forgave him before he finished. He did not know who she was. That was what made the beginning feel clean. At that time, Vanessa used her mother's surname Hart without explanation. She wore simple clothes, drove an old gray sedan, and worked publicly as a project coordinator for the Crescent Children's Foundation. She had grown up inside a family whose money had rooms within rooms, but her grandfather had taught her that visible wealth attracted 2 kinds of people: those who wanted to use it and those who wanted to punish it. So Vanessa learned to be useful before she was known. Adrian loved that version of her, or Vanessa thought he did. He loved her patience when he missed dinner. He loved her ability to read contracts and find traps his attorneys overlooked. He loved the way investors softened when Vanessa spoke about human impact instead of market domination. He loved that she could calm a room without raising her voice. He said she was his good luck. For a long time, she believed that was tenderness. When his company nearly collapsed in its 3rd year, Vanessa introduced him to a quiet bridge fund through a legal structure that did not disclose her name. When a supplier threatened litigation, she arranged for a mediator her family office had used for decades. When Adrian needed credibility, Vanessa's foundation invited him to speak at a pediatric innovation event. Every rescue was discreet. Every signature hid behind trusts, committees, and professional distance. Adrian never asked why doors opened after Vanessa made one phone call. He preferred to believe the world had finally recognized him. Success changed his posture first. His shoulders became broader in photographs, his chin lifted, his pauses grew longer because he expected people to wait for him. Then success changed his language. He stopped saying, "We survived," and began saying, "I built." He stopped asking Vanessa what she thought and began telling her what would be convenient. Camille arrived during the 5th year, at a product launch in Paris. She was a public relations consultant with bright eyes, sharper instincts, and a talent for making powerful men feel chosen. She called Adrian visionary in interviews. She touched his elbow while guiding him toward photographers. She laughed before he finished jokes. Vanessa watched all of it from the side of the stage, holding a binder of emergency notes and telling herself that insecurity was beneath her. The first lie came wrapped in plausibility. Camille needed to travel with Adrian because European press required continuity. Then she needed access to his calendar because messaging had to be controlled. Then she needed a suite on the same floor because investors might call late. Adrian explained each step with the weary patience of a man lecturing someone too emotional to understand business. Vanessa did understand business. She also understood cowardice. What she did not understand was why she kept staying. Maybe it was the memory of rain outside the library. Maybe it was the fear that leaving would make 7 years look foolish. Maybe it was because Adrian's mother cried whenever Vanessa mentioned postponing the wedding, saying Adrian needed one person who would never abandon him. Vanessa mistook endurance for loyalty until endurance began to rot inside her. The engagement came after a scandal. A former executive accused Adrian of hiding trial data. Vanessa quietly helped prove the accusation false, though the audit revealed several internal failures Adrian had ignored. His board demanded stability. His public image needed a devoted partner. Adrian proposed at a press dinner 3 days later with cameras ready and Camille standing behind the photographer. Vanessa said yes because the room was watching. That had been her mistake. By the week of the wedding, Adrian no longer bothered to hide Camille. He called her indispensable. He said Vanessa was too traditional to understand modern professional intimacy. When Vanessa objected, he kissed her forehead like a child and told her that jealousy was unattractive in a wife. The rehearsal dinner at the Lucent Crown was supposed to be the final humiliation before the ceremony. Adrian believed Vanessa would absorb it because she had absorbed everything else. He did not know the hotel belonged to a Hart family trust. He did not know the wedding contracts, vendor deposits, security credentials, and guest access permissions had all passed across Vanessa's desk. He did not know that the quiet bride he mocked had spent the last month documenting every lie, every unauthorized transfer, every message Camille sent from his encrypted phone, and every attempt Adrian made to move company assets before the marriage. Most importantly, he did not know that Vanessa had postponed leaving him only because she needed the children in the Foundation's hospital program protected from the collapse he would cause when exposed. Love had kept her patient. Responsibility had made her precise. Chapter 3. At the rehearsal dinner, Adrian still thought the evening belonged to him. He looked at Marianne Bell with faint irritation, as if an older woman in a black suit could only be a hotel manager coming to apologize for a service delay. Camille looked less certain. People who lived by appearances were often quicker to recognize authority when it entered a room. Marianne approached Vanessa first, not Adrian. She carried a slim leather portfolio and wore no jewelry except a watch with a square face. Her gray hair was pinned neatly at the nape of her neck. Nothing about her invited drama. That was what made her terrifying. "Miss Hart," she said, "everything is ready." Adrian's smile thinned. "Miss Hart? We are all friends here. If this is about Vanessa being upset, you can speak to me. I am the one paying for this wedding." Marianne turned to him with professional calm. "No, Mr. Vale, you are not." The sentence landed harder than a shout. A murmur moved through the ballroom. Adrian's father stopped chewing. One of the bridesmaids looked at the ceiling as if she could disappear into the chandelier. Camille's hand slid off Adrian's shoulder. Adrian laughed once. "Excuse me?" Vanessa did not look at him. She opened the folder she had placed on the table and removed a single page. The deposits were paid from an account connected to the Hart Hospitality Trust. The venue was never billed to you. You signed a ceremonial estimate because you wanted your name on the front page of the wedding plan. "That is ridiculous," Adrian said. "My office handled the arrangements." "Your office emailed requests," Marianne replied. Miss Hart approved or rejected them. Camille's bracelet flashed again as she gripped her clutch. Vanessa saw the movement and felt something old and cold pass through her. Her mother's bracelet had been a private object, not because of its price, but because of the woman who wore it. Elaine Hart had built children's clinics in neighborhoods where wealthy donors preferred not to park. She had taught Vanessa that power meant nothing if it did not protect someone more vulnerable than itself. Adrian had put that memory on Camille's wrist to make a point. So Vanessa made one back. "The bracelet," she said. Camille blinked. "What?" "Take it off." Adrian's face darkened. "Vanessa, do not be petty. That bracelet was not yours to give. It was in my safe. Because I placed it there when we moved apartments, and because I trusted you." The word trusted made something flicker across Adrian's face, but it vanished quickly under annoyance. "It is jewelry. I can replace it." Vanessa finally looked at him. "That is exactly why you never deserved to touch it." Marianne opened her portfolio. For clarity, the bracelet is listed in the Elaine Hart Memorial Inventory, Item 17. It is not marital property, not a gift to Mr. Vale, and not transferable. Miss Rosier, if you leave this room with it, security will treat the matter as theft. Camille's cheeks flushed. For the first time that night, her beauty looked like effort. She fumbled with the clasp. The bracelet resisted, then opened. She placed it on the table as though it had burned her skin. Adrian stood. "Enough. Vanessa, you are embarrassing yourself." He expected her to flinch. She did not. "No," she said. "I embarrassed myself for years by explaining you to people who saw you clearly." The room went still again, but this time the silence belonged to her. Adrian lowered his voice. "Do you understand what you are doing? Tomorrow is our wedding. Investors are here. Board members are here. My family is here." "Yes," Vanessa said. "That is why I waited until tonight." His eyes narrowed. "You waited?" Marianne placed 3 documents on the table, each clipped with a blue tab. "Mr. Vale, you have been served notice of an emergency board review, an asset preservation order requested by minority stakeholders, and a formal demand for records concerning transfers from ValeMed subsidiaries to shell vendors connected to Miss Rosier's consulting agency." Camille made a small sound. Adrian turned toward her, not with concern but warning. Vanessa noticed. So did everyone else close enough to see his face. The man who had mocked a woman's 7 years of love was already calculating whom to sacrifice first. Chapter 4. Adrian had built his public life on the belief that speed could outrun scrutiny. He spoke fast, decided fast, hired fast, fired fast, and apologized only when delay would cost more than pride. In the early years, investors called that energy. Journalists called it disruptive leadership. Vanessa had once called it courage, because she had been too young in love to distinguish courage from appetite. But documents did not care how fast a man spoke. Marianne Bell's papers sat on the white tablecloth like stones. Adrian did not touch them. His general counsel, seated 2 tables away, had turned pale and was whispering into his phone. Camille stared at the bracelet, abandoned between the champagne glasses, as if it might accuse her next. "This is a private event," Adrian said. "It became a governance matter when you invited directors, investors, and company officers," Marianne replied. "Several are legal witnesses to your statements tonight." "My statements?" Adrian scoffed, but the sound came out thinner than before. Vanessa could almost see him searching for the right mask. Charming groom would not work. Wounded lover might. Outraged executive, perhaps. He chose outrage because it had served him well with employees who could not afford to answer back. "Vanessa is emotional," he announced, turning to the room. "She has been under pressure. Weddings do that to women. I apologize to everyone for this little performance." For 7 years, that tone had done more damage than shouting. It made Vanessa's pain sound decorative. It made his cruelty seem like patience. It invited other people to join him in managing her instead of believing her. This time, Vanessa was ready for it. She lifted a small remote from the folder and pressed one button. The ballroom screens, which had been cycling through engagement photographs, went black. A moment later, a timeline appeared. It was not dramatic, it was worse. Dates, payments, contract numbers, emails, board approvals, unauthorized changes. Adrian's name appeared beside signatures. Camille's agency appeared beside vendor invoices. A shell company in Delaware appeared beside consulting fees for work never delivered. No one laughed now. Adrian lunged toward the nearest technician. "Turn that off." 2 hotel security officers stepped calmly into his path. Their posture was polite, but their shoulders were not negotiable. The lead officer looked to Vanessa. "Miss Hart?" Let it play, she said. Another murmur spread, but this one carried recognition. Miss Hart. Not Adrian's quiet fiancée, not the woman who needed him. Miss Hart, whose family name was carved discreetly into hospital wings, scholarship programs, and the private trust behind half the city's cultural properties. Adrian heard it too. His eyes moved from the officers to the screen, then to Vanessa. For the first time that evening, doubt cut through his anger. "What is this?" he asked. "Evidence," Vanessa said. "You investigated me?" "No, I stopped protecting you from the investigations you earned." That sentence hurt him more than the documents. Vanessa saw it in the brief tightening around his mouth. Men like Adrian could survive being accused of greed. They could even turn greed into ambition with the right interview. But being told they had been protected by the woman they belittled damaged the mythology that kept them standing. Camille whispered, "Adrian, you said those payments were bonuses." He snapped, "Be quiet." The command was so sharp that several guests turned. Camille recoiled. Her eyes shone, not with innocence, but with the ugly realization that she had mistaken proximity to power for possession of it. The screen changed to a message thread. "She still thinks the wedding is real? Real enough to keep the Hart people calm until the next funding round closes." Camille, "And after?" "After she can cry in a house I bought." Cruel. Useful. Vanessa had read those words many times. Alone, in the blue light of her laptop, in Marianne's office, in the back seat of a car outside the children's hospital, while a little girl from the foundation waved at her through a window. The words had cut differently each time. Now, displayed above the orchids and candles, they did not cut at all. They clarified. Adrian looked at the screen as if he could intimidate it into disappearing. "That is private correspondence," he said. "From a company device," Marianne replied, "recovered during an authorized internal compliance review after suspicious vendor payments were flagged." "Authorized by whom?" Vanessa's answer was calm, "By the investment committee." Adrian laughed again, but fear had entered it. "You are not on my investment committee." "No," Vanessa said. "I chair the trust that controls the bridge facility your company has depended on for 18 months. The room seemed to inhale. Adrian did not. For once, he had no immediate sentence ready. Chapter 5. The first thing Adrian felt was not regret. It was arithmetic. Vanessa watched his eyes shift the way they always did when numbers rearranged themselves in his mind. The bridge facility, the hospital pilot, the emergency licensing agreement, the European distribution introduction, the conference stage in Zurich, the senator's office that returned his call after Vanessa hosted a foundation dinner, the anonymous donor who covered the pediatric trial expansion when ValeMed was too cash-starved to continue. One by one, the miracles of his career found Vanessa's shadow behind them. He sat down slowly. Camille remained standing, stranded between the head table and the watching guests. Without the bracelet, her wrist looked bare and strangely young. She glanced at Adrian, perhaps expecting reassurance, perhaps expecting the man who had promised her a future to defend her. Adrian did not look at her. He looked at Vanessa with a new expression, one she had never seen from him before. Not love, not even fear, exactly. It was the shocked resentment of a man discovering that the floor under his feet had belonged to someone else all along. "Why did you never tell me?" he asked. Vanessa almost smiled. Not because it was funny, but because some questions were so revealing they carried their own answer. "Because I wanted to know who you were when you thought I had nothing to offer." The words traveled through the ballroom with quiet force. Adrian's mother covered her mouth. His father looked down at his untouched steak. One of Adrian's directors closed his eyes, as if mentally resigning from every conversation he had ever had with the man. Adrian leaned forward. "I loved you." It was the wrong sentence. It arrived late, dressed badly, and asking for credit. Vanessa remembered 1,000 moments when those words might have mattered. In the hallway outside her mother's memorial, when Adrian took a call instead of holding her hand. On her 32nd birthday, when he sent flowers chosen by an assistant and spent the evening with Camille in Lisbon. In the apartment kitchen, when Vanessa asked if there was someone else, and he kissed her forehead with pity. Now the words sounded like a password to a door already locked. "No," Vanessa said. "You loved being loved by me." Camille let out a shaky breath. "Adrian, what is she talking about? You said she was clinging to you. You said she had no family left." Vanessa turned toward her. "He lied to you too." Camille's face hardened, then cracked around the edges. "Do not act like we are the same." "We are not," Vanessa said. I did not help him steal." The line was gentle in volume and merciless in content. Camille looked toward the screen again. The invoice list remained visible. Her agency name appeared beside inflated contracts, duplicate reimbursements, travel expenses billed to medical education programs, and payments that had passed through accounts she clearly recognized. She shook her head once, not in denial of the facts but in denial of their consequences. Adrian stood again. "This is absurd. Even if Vanessa controls one financing channel, she cannot destroy my company without hurting patients, employees, and shareholders." There it was, the hostage argument. For years, Adrian had used noble nouns as shields: patients, employees, innovation, family, future. He wrapped his ambition in people who would suffer if anyone stopped him. Vanessa had anticipated that defense because she had helped him craft it too many times. Marianne took another document from the portfolio. "The preservation plan has already been approved by independent directors. Payroll is funded. Patient trials continue under third-party oversight. Vendor payments are frozen only where conflicts exist. Mr. Vale's voting authority is suspended pending review." Adrian stared at her. "You cannot suspend me." A man's voice came from the second table. "We can." Everyone turned. Daniel Mercer, ValeMed's oldest independent director, rose from his chair. He had silver eyebrows, a tired face, and the air of someone who had ignored his conscience for too long. "The emergency meeting concluded at 6:45, Daniel said. "You were notified through counsel. You chose to attend this dinner instead." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Daniel." "Do not," Daniel said. "You told us Vanessa was unstable. You told us she was threatening the company because of jealousy. Then compliance sent the records. She was the reason the company survived." The public nature of the statement changed the room again. It was one thing for Vanessa to expose him. Adrian could call that revenge. It was another for his own director to confirm it. Adrian's anger lost some of its height. "We can fix this," he said to Vanessa, lowering his voice in a sudden attempt at intimacy. "You are hurt. I understand that. I said stupid things. Camille was a mistake. Let us speak privately." Camille made a wounded sound behind him. Vanessa looked at the man she had loved for 7 years. The shape of him was familiar enough to ache. His left cufflink was crooked. She had bought him those cufflinks after his first successful trial. He had been so proud that night he cried in the elevator and hid his face against her shoulder. Somewhere between that elevator and this ballroom, he had decided gratitude was humiliation. "No," she said. Adrian blinked. It was such a small word. It took 7 years to reach her mouth. Chapter 6. The wedding was not canceled that night. That was the detail that made Adrian believe he still had a chance. After the rehearsal dinner collapsed into whispers, legal calls, and guests pretending not to stare, Vanessa left through a private corridor with Marianne. She did not cry until the elevator doors closed. Even then, she did it quietly, one hand pressed against her mouth, her body trembling with the violence of staying composed too long. Marianne did not offer empty comfort. She handed Vanessa a linen handkerchief and stood beside her in silence. When Vanessa finally breathed again, she looked at her reflection in the elevator wall. Her eyes were red. Her dress was still perfect. The contrast offended her. "I thought I would feel free," she said. "Freedom often arrives before the body believes it," Marianne replied. Vanessa almost laughed. "That sounds like something my mother would have said." "Your mother said worse when she was angry." That did make Vanessa laugh, once, broken but real. They spent the rest of the night in a conference suite 2 floors below the ballroom. Lawyers came and went. Security reports were reviewed. The hotel manager confirmed that Adrian had attempted to access the bridal suite after Vanessa left. He had been denied. Camille had checked into a separate room under her own name, then called the front desk 4 times asking whether Mr. Vale had requested a key. He had not. By morning, the wedding website had vanished. The floral team had been instructed to remove Adrian's monogram from the aisle arch. The officiant had received a revised ceremony plan. The guest list had been reduced, then restored, then quietly rearranged. At 9:20, Adrian called Vanessa. She let it ring. At 9:22, he texted, "Do not make a permanent decision from temporary anger." At 9:25, "We owe each other a conversation." At 9:31, "You will look cruel if you humiliate me today." At 9:38, "Vanessa, answer me." At 9:40, "I know you still love me." That was the message that made her put the phone down. Not because it was untrue, Love did not vanish on command. It lingered in muscle memory, in stupid tenderness, in the way her mind still knew he disliked orange juice with pulp. But love was not a legal obligation. Love was not consent to be diminished. Love was not a debt that required a woman to keep financing the man who spent her devotion like disposable income. At 10:15, Adrian found Marianne in the hotel lobby. Vanessa was watching from the mezzanine, unseen behind a screen of white orchids. Adrian had not changed from the night before. His tuxedo shirt was open at the throat, his hair less controlled, but exhaustion made him look more human. For a dangerous second, Vanessa remembered the young man in the rain. Then he spoke. "Tell her I will forgive this if she stops now." Marianne's expression did not change. "Mr. Vale, you are not in a position to forgive. You people think money makes you untouchable. No, we think records make people accountable." "She loved me for 7 years," Adrian said. "She needs me. This is panic." From the mezzanine, Vanessa felt those words settle into her like ice water. She needs me. Not she knows me, not she trusted me, not I hurt her, needs me. Marianne looked up. She had known Vanessa was there, of course. Marianne always knew where everyone was. Their eyes met briefly. Vanessa stepped out from behind the orchids. Adrian turned. Relief crossed his face so quickly it was almost insulting. He believed her appearance meant surrender. He even smiled a little. "There you are," he said. "Come down. We can still fix the optics." "The optics," Vanessa repeated. He spread his hands. "You know what I mean." "I do." She descended the staircase slowly. Hotel staff moved around the lobby with controlled efficiency. White roses still filled the vases. A pianist rehearsed in the corner, stopping after one wrong note as if he had sensed the air change. Adrian lowered his voice when she reached him. "I was angry last night. You blindsided me. I exposed you." "Fine, you exposed me. Are you happy? Camille is gone. The board is overreacting. My attorneys can unwind half of this by Monday, but I do not want a war with you." "Because you care about me?" He hesitated one beat too long. "Because we built a life," he said. Vanessa looked at him, truly looked. His face was still handsome. His eyes were still the color she once compared to winter glass, but she could no longer find the man she had been grieving. Maybe he had existed. Maybe he had not. Either way, he was not coming to save her from this one. "No," she said. "I built a shelter around your ambition and called it a life." Adrian flinched as if she had slapped him. For once, she did not apologize for the truth landing hard. Chapter 7. The ceremony began at 4 in the afternoon. By then, everyone knew something had happened, but almost no one knew what would happen next. That uncertainty filled the chapel hall like weather. Guests arrived in cautious clusters, dressed in silk and dark suits, whispering behind programs that no longer bore Adrian's name on the front. The Lucent Crown Chapel was not a church, but it had borrowed the language of reverence. High arched windows, pale stone walls, white flowers gathered at the aisle in disciplined abundance. At the front, where Adrian expected to stand as groom, there was only a narrow table holding a glass vase, a legal folder, and Elaine Hart's restored diamond bracelet. Adrian entered at 3:58 with his attorney and no boutonniere. He stopped when he saw the table. His face went blank, which meant he was trying very hard not to show fear. He had dressed properly now, in a fresh black tuxedo, hair combed back, shoes polished. A man prepared for cameras. A man prepared to reframe disaster as reconciliation. Camille entered 2 minutes later through a side door. Her dress was pale blue, inappropriate enough to be noticed and restrained enough to claim innocence. She sat in the third row alone. No one moved to greet her. Adrian saw her and looked away. The cruelty of that small action did more to expose him than another screen of evidence might have. Camille's mouth tightened, her chin lifted. Vanessa, waiting behind the chapel doors, saw it through the narrow glass panel and understood that Camille had finally reached the room where consequences began. Marianne stood beside Vanessa. "You can still choose a smaller version of this." "No," Vanessa said. "Are you certain?" Vanessa touched the bracelet on the table through the memory of her mother's wrist. "He made my private loyalty public property. I am taking it back in the same language." Marianne nodded once, then walked slowly. The doors opened. The guests rose, partly from instinct, partly from shock. Vanessa stepped into the aisle wearing a wedding gown no one had seen before. It was not the elaborate gown Adrian's stylist had chosen, the one with a stiff bodice and a train designed for magazine photographs. This gown was clean, fluid, and almost severe, with long sleeves and a narrow satin belt. Her hair was pinned low, her face was calm. She did not carry a bouquet. She carried documents. Adrian stared at her as she approached. For a moment, the old hunger flashed in his eyes. Not love, Vanessa realized. Possession recognizing beauty only when others could see it. She stopped 6 feet in front of him. Vanessa, he whispered. Good, we can still manage this. She looked past him. At the side of the front row, a man rose. Elias Wren was not as famous as Adrian. He did not command rooms by volume. He had the quiet, steady presence of someone used to being trusted in emergencies. He was a trauma surgeon, director of the children's surgical program Vanessa's foundation had funded, and one of the few people who had known her real role for years without trying to use it. He had met Vanessa during her mother's final project, a mobile clinic initiative that Adrian once dismissed as sentimental philanthropy. Elias had watched Vanessa negotiate supply contracts at midnight, comfort families at dawn, and refuse public credit for work that saved lives. He had loved her for a long time, but never asked her to spend herself empty to prove she deserved it. Adrian followed her gaze. His expression changed. What is he doing here? Elias walked to Vanessa's side, not touching her until she reached for his hand first. The room understood before Adrian did. He laughed, sharp and disbelieving. No. Vanessa turned to him. Adrian Vale, this ceremony is not our wedding. His face drained. You cannot be serious. This is the public dissolution of a performance you mistook for ownership. Marianne stepped forward and placed the folder on the table. The legal marriage license between Miss Hart and Mr. Vale was never filed. At Miss Hart's instruction, no valid ceremony will proceed between them. Adrian looked from Marianne to Vanessa to Elias. You brought another man to my wedding? Vanessa's voice remained even. No, I brought the truth to mine. The officiant, a retired judge and longtime family friend, stepped forward. Miss Hart has requested a private commitment ceremony witnessed by selected family, foundation trustees, and friends. Guests who do not wish to remain may leave now. No one moved. Adrian did. He stepped toward Vanessa, but Elias shifted slightly, not aggressively, simply enough to make the boundary visible. Adrian stopped. His eyes burned. She loved me 7 years, he said, turning to Elias with a bitter smile. Do you think she can just switch that off and belong to you? Elias did not rise to the bait. She does not belong to me. The sentence was so simple that it exposed the poverty of Adrian's entire argument. Vanessa looked at Elias then, and something in her face softened in a way Adrian had not seen in years because he had stopped earning it. The judge asked whether she wished to proceed. Vanessa said yes. Elias turned toward her. He did not perform for the room. He did not make a speech about rescuing her. He spoke quietly, clearly, and only to her. I have watched you carry rooms that never thanked you, he said. I have watched you protect people who did not know your name. I will never ask you to become smaller so I can feel tall. If you walk beside me, I will walk beside you. If you need silence, I will keep it with you. If you need the world to hear you, I will stand where your voice can travel. Vanessa's composure trembled, just once. Then she took his face in her hands and kissed him. In front of Adrian. In front of the guests. In the hall where Adrian had expected her to prove she needed him. For a few seconds, the room did not breathe. Then someone in the back began to clap. It was not loud at first. It sounded almost inappropriate, a small rebellion against the stunned silence. Then another person joined, and another, until applause moved through the chapel like a tide. Adrian stood outside that sound. The bride kissing another man before him was Vanessa. And she had never looked less like someone who needed permission to leave. Chapter 8. Adrian did not collapse. Vanessa had known he would not. Men like Adrian rarely shattered in public when rage could still hold them upright. He smiled instead, or tried to. The result was a thin, ruined line across his face. Beautiful performance, he said when the applause faded. Very moving, but sentiment does not decide corporate control. The judge looked at him over her glasses. Mr. Vale, you were invited to remain as a witness, not as a participant. I am a participant in my own life. Vanessa turned from Elias, her hand still in his. Then start taking responsibility for it. Adrian's attorney touched his elbow and murmured something. Adrian shook him off. His eyes had moved past romance now. He had found the battlefield he understood, reputation, money, control. You think this ends me, he said. It does not. I founded Valmed. I hold patents. Employees follow me. Patients trust the brand. Investors like winners, Vanessa. They forgive complicated men. Sometimes, Vanessa said, when complicated is not a polite word for fraudulent. Marianne gestured to the side doors. 2 compliance officers entered with Daniel Mercer and a court-appointed observer. Behind them came a woman from the state attorney's office whom Adrian clearly recognized. His confidence flickered. This is harassment, he said. The observer replied, this is service of an expanded records order. You are required to preserve all devices, accounts, and communications related to Valmed, Rosier Public Strategies, and the listed vendors. Camille stood suddenly. I have records. Every head turned toward her. Adrian's voice dropped. Sit down. This time, Camille did not obey. Her face was pale, but humiliation had fermented into anger. No. You told me the contracts were approved. You told me Vanessa's family money was practically yours after the wedding. You told me she was too dependent to question anything. Adrian's expression hardened. Careful. Camille laughed once, a brittle sound. That word would have helped earlier. She opened her clutch and pulled out a phone. I have voice messages. I have emails from your private account. I have the spreadsheet you made me use for the invoices. Adrian looked as if he might cross the aisle toward her. Security moved first. Not dramatically. Just enough. Vanessa watched Camille with complicated stillness. There was no sisterhood in betrayal. Camille had mocked her, worn her mother's bracelet, and enjoyed the illusion of replacing her. But accountability did not require Vanessa to deny the obvious. Adrian had used Camille too. Not innocently, not harmlessly, but predictably. Give them to the observer, Vanessa said. Camille looked at her. Will that help me? It may help the truth. Camille swallowed. For the first time, she seemed to understand that truth was not the same as rescue. The state attorney's representative stepped forward to collect the phone. Adrian turned to the room, desperate now to reclaim an audience. You are all enjoying this because it is theatrical, he said. But remember who created value. Remember who stood on stages. Remember whose name built the company. Daniel Mercer answered with quiet exhaustion. Your name was on the stage because other people kept the floor from collapsing. Adrian's face twisted. And you knew? All of you knew she was behind the financing? Some of us knew enough to be ashamed, Daniel said. That confession altered the emotional weight in the room. Vanessa saw several directors look away. Shame, at least, was more useful than denial. It could become testimony. It could become reform. Elias squeezed her hand once, not to steady her because he thought she was weak, but to remind her she was not alone. The judge cleared her throat. Miss Hart, do you wish to continue? Vanessa looked at Adrian. He was breathing hard, eyes bright with the fury of a man who had lost control and wanted to call the loss injustice. Yes, she said, but first I want the record clear. She stepped toward the table and lifted her mother's bracelet. This belonged to Elaine Hart, Vanessa said. My mother believed wealth should move toward suffering, not vanity. For 7 years I confused loyalty with silence. I allowed a man to stand in rooms built by my family's work and speak as if he stood alone. That was my mistake, and I will spend the next part of my life correcting it. She turned slightly, addressing the guests without raising her voice. Valmed will not be destroyed. The pediatric programs will continue. Employees will be protected. Patients will not become collateral damage for one man's arrogance, but no one will hide behind them again. Adrian laughed under his breath. Listen to yourself. You sound like a queen. Vanessa clasped the bracelet around her own wrist. No, she said. I sound like the person who read the contracts. Even some of Adrian's relatives laughed then, softly, involuntarily. The sound cut him deeper than applause. Chapter 9. The private commitment ceremony lasted 12 minutes. It had no orchestra swell, no dramatic aisle walk, no society page choreography. Vanessa and Elias stood before the retired judge with Marianne, Daniel, the foundation trustees, and a room full of people who had entered expecting scandal and stayed to witness a boundary become a life. Adrian remained near the back under the watch of his attorney. He could have left. Pride kept him there, perhaps because leaving would admit defeat, perhaps because some part of him still believed Vanessa would look back. She did not. Elias placed no ring on her finger. Vanessa had asked for that, not because she rejected symbols, but because she needed the day to mark freedom before possession. Instead, he tied a narrow blue ribbon around her wrist beside her mother's bracelet. It came from the first mobile clinic Vanessa's mother had funded, a faded strip saved in an archive box for sentimental reasons. Elias had found it with Marianne's help. A promise does not have to look expensive to be kept, he said. Vanessa closed her eyes for 1 second. Adrian saw that, the softness, the trust, the unguarded breath. It wounded him more than the documents because it proved something he had avoided understanding. Vanessa had not become cold, she had become careful about where she placed her warmth. When the judge pronounced the commitment witnessed, Elias kissed Vanessa again, shorter this time, gentle enough to be private inside a public room. Adrian walked out before the applause began. His exit might have been dignified if Camille had not followed him into the lobby. Vanessa did not intend to watch, but the chapel doors remained open and their voices carried. Adrian turned on Camille near the marble fountain. "You stupid girl," he hissed. "Do you understand what you did?" Camille's reply shook, but held. "I told the truth. You destroyed both of us." "No, Adrian, you built a room with no exits and called it love." Vanessa looked down. That sentence did not absolve Camille, but it revealed that some lessons arrived only after public shame stripped away the costumes. Security escorted Adrian to a private conference room where his devices were inventoried. Camille was taken separately to provide a statement. Guests drifted into the reception hall, where the flowers had been rearranged, the monogrammed napkins removed, and the cake topper replaced with a simple cascade of white orchids. The reception was strange, but not sad. People spoke carefully at first, then more honestly. A pediatric nurse from the foundation hugged Vanessa and whispered that Elaine would have been proud. Daniel Mercer apologized without asking to be comforted. Adrian's mother approached with red eyes, and both hands clenched around a tissue. "I failed you," she said. Vanessa's first instinct was to soften the sentence for her. She resisted it. "You protected him," Vanessa said. The older woman nodded, tears spilling. "I did. I thought if you married him, he would become the man he used to be." "That was not my job." "No," Adrian's mother said. "It was not." There was no embrace, not then, but there was truth, and truth was sometimes the first mercy after years of performance. Later, Vanessa stepped onto a balcony overlooking the city. The July evening had turned gold at the edges. Below, cars moved along the avenue in patient lines. The world had not ended because one engagement did. The thought felt almost rude in its simplicity. Elias joined her with 2 glasses of water. "No champagne?" she asked. "You have had enough things handed to you for symbolism today." She laughed, genuinely this time. He leaned on the railing beside her, leaving space between them until she closed it. That was one of the things she loved about him. He understood that gentleness was not distance, it was permission. "Are you all right?" he asked. Vanessa watched a bus stop at the corner. A woman with a stroller stepped off, adjusting a child's hat against the sun. Ordinary tenderness continued everywhere, indifferent to scandal. "I am grieving someone who may never have existed," Vanessa said. Elias nodded. "That is still grief." "And I am relieved." "That is still allowed." She looked at him. "You make room for complicated answers. You have lived through complicated years." Inside, music began. Not the wedding march Adrian had chosen, but a soft piano piece Vanessa's mother loved. Marianne, clearly responsible, was pretending not to watch from the doorway. Vanessa held out her hand to Elias. "Dance with me?" He smiled. "Here?" "Here." They danced on the balcony without an audience, without cameras, without a perfect frame. Vanessa's dress moved around her ankles. Her mother's bracelet caught the last sunlight. For the first time all day, she was not exposing anything, proving anything, or ending anything. She was simply there. Chapter 10. The aftermath did not become clean just because the ceremony had. Public stories rarely cared about private accuracy. By Monday morning, headlines had turned Vanessa into several different women. Billionaire bride humiliates groom. Secret heiress dumps founder at altar. Mistress exposes medical CEO. Some articles painted Vanessa as ruthless. Others called her iconic. A few asked whether she had planned the entire relationship as a corporate trap, because the world often struggled to imagine a woman could be both wounded and strategic. Vanessa did not respond to every story. She released one statement through the Hart family office. Valmed's patient programs will continue under independent oversight. Employee payroll and research obligations have been secured. The review concerns executive conduct, vendor conflicts, and misuse of restricted funds. No further comment will be made regarding private relationships. The statement was boring by design. Boring protected people. Adrian tried to be more interesting. His first interview was canceled after counsel intervened. His second attempt, a leaked voice memo to a friendly journalist, described Vanessa as vindictive, emotionally unstable, and manipulated by old family advisors. Unfortunately for him, the memo also contradicted his prior board testimony. Marianne forwarded it to the appropriate attorneys without comment. Camille cooperated for 3 days, then attempted to sell her version of the story to a streaming producer. The state attorney's office reminded her that monetizing evidence under review would not help her credibility. She retreated, then issued an apology drafted by someone expensive. Vanessa read only the first paragraph. It contained the word pain 6 times and responsibility once. She closed the page. Responsibility was not a decorative word. It required weight. Within 6 weeks, Adrian resigned from Valmed before the board could remove him formally. He called it a personal decision. The regulatory filings called it separation following internal review. Investors understood the difference. His voting rights remained tied up in litigation. Several assets were frozen. 2 executives who had enabled the vendor scheme entered cooperation agreements. The company survived because Vanessa had insisted from the beginning that it must. That mattered to her more than Adrian's fall. One afternoon, she visited the children's hospital wing her mother had funded. The plaque still read Elaine Hart Center for Pediatric Mobility. Vanessa ran her fingers over the engraved letters and remembered being 19, angry at her mother's illness, furious that wealth could buy marble and machines but not more time. A little boy in a green cast rolled past in a wheelchair decorated with stickers. Elias walked beside him, listening seriously to an explanation of why dinosaurs would make excellent hospital security guards. When Elias looked up and saw Vanessa, his face changed in the small, honest way that made her chest ache. The boy waved. "Are you the lady from the news?" Vanessa crouched so they were eye level. "Maybe. Depends which news." "My grandma said you scared a bad man." Elias coughed into his hand. Vanessa smiled. "I told the truth to a man who needed to hear it." "Was he scared?" "I think he was surprised." The boy considered that. Dinosaurs would have helped. "I will remember that for next time." After he rolled away, Elias looked at her. "Next time?" "Apparently, I have security recommendations to consider." They walked through the hospital garden, where donors' names appeared on small brass plaques along the path. Vanessa used to find those plaques comforting. Now she studied them with a more skeptical eye. Names were easy. Stewardship was harder. "I want to restructure the foundation," she said. Elias glanced at her. "How?" "More transparent grants, independent family review, fewer vanity events, direct patient assistance protected from corporate partnerships, and I want a fellowship for women in medical compliance." "That is specific." "I have had a specific month." He smiled. "Your mother would approve." Vanessa looked toward the wing. "She would ask why I did not do it sooner." Also true. That was another thing she loved about Elias. He did not polish the dead into saints. He let them remain real, which made memory less lonely. They stopped beneath a maple tree. The leaves shifted overhead, breaking sunlight into pieces across the path. Vanessa thought of Adrian then, not with longing, but with a distant sadness. 7 years was not nothing. It was meals cooked, speeches edited, flights rearranged, fevers nursed, apologies accepted, warnings ignored. It was a life she had tried to build. To dismiss it entirely would be another kind of lie. But she no longer needed the years to justify themselves. They had taught her the cost of abandoning her own boundaries. That was enough. Chapter 11. The summit opened with Vanessa at the podium. She had refused a dramatic introduction, no secret heiress language, no viral bride references, no mention of Adrian beyond the governance reforms that made the day necessary. The program listed her simply as Vanessa Hart, chair of the Elaine Hart Foundation. For once, simplicity did not feel like hiding. She looked out over the ballroom. In the front row, Marianne sat with her hands folded over a legal pad. Daniel Mercer sat 2 seats away, preparing to speak on board accountability. Camille was not present, but her submitted evidence had helped prosecutors unwind the vendor scheme. She would face consequences, though not the cruel fantasy version strangers demanded online. Real accountability was slower, less satisfying, and more important. Elias entered quietly during the second minute, still in hospital scrubs beneath a dark jacket. He stood at the back rather than interrupt the room. Vanessa saw him and felt warmth move through her without needing to chase it. She began. For years, I believed quiet loyalty was always noble. I was wrong. Loyalty without boundaries becomes permission for harm. Quiet without truth becomes shelter for people who misuse trust. The room listened. Vanessa did not tell them every personal detail. She did not need to. The story had already been fed to the public in pieces, some true, some sharpened for clicks. What she offered instead was the lesson beneath the spectacle. She spoke about restricted funds and why emotional proximity to founders could compromise oversight. She spoke about patient programs that must never depend on the reputation of one charismatic executive. She spoke about women whose labor disappeared behind men's public victories. She spoke about documents, audits, independent directors, and the courage required to ask simple questions when everyone else preferred a convenient myth. Her voice did not shake. Near the end, she touched the bracelet on her wrist. My mother used to say that power should leave fingerprints only where protection was needed. I used to believe that meant staying invisible. Now I think it means something else. It means we do not use power to humiliate. We use it to prevent humiliation from becoming a system. Marianne looked down at her notes, but Vanessa saw her wipe one eye. The Elaine Hart Foundation will fund 5 new compliance fellowships this year, Vanessa continued. They will be awarded to women working in medical ethics, nonprofit finance, and patient advocacy. Their work will not trend online. It may never become dramatic. That is how we will know it is working. Soft laughter moved through the room. Vanessa smiled. Drama is expensive. Prevention is better. When she finished, the applause was steady and thoughtful, not the explosive applause from the chapel, not scandal applause. This was recognition of work, and it nourished a different part of her. After the panel, a young woman approached Vanessa near the stage. She wore a navy suit slightly too large in the shoulders and held a folder against her chest. Miss Hart, she said, nervous, I applied for the fellowship. What is your name? Maya. Tell me what you want to change, Maya. The young woman took a breath and began speaking about billing transparency for rural clinics. Her voice strengthened as she explained. Vanessa listened carefully, asking questions, making notes. Across the room, Elias watched with a smile. Marianne was already speaking to someone from the selection committee. Life did not rebuild itself in one cinematic moment. It rebuilt in meetings, signatures, honest conversations, quiet breakfasts, sleep that came easier, old songs that no longer hurt, and the first morning a woman woke without rehearsing someone else's mood before feeling her own. Months later, when people still recognized Vanessa from the viral clip, they often asked about the kiss. Was it planned? Was it revenge? Did Adrian know? Vanessa never gave them the answer they wanted. The kiss had not been for Adrian, even though he saw it. It had not been a weapon, even though it wounded him. It was the first public moment in years when Vanessa chose tenderness without asking whether it would protect a man's pride. That was why it mattered. One evening in winter, Vanessa and Elias returned to the balcony at the Lucent Crown after a foundation dinner. The city glittered below them. The air was cold enough that Vanessa tucked her hands into the sleeves of her coat. Elias offered his arm. Are you thinking about that day? A little. Good memory or bad memory? Vanessa considered. Inside the hotel, staff cleared plates. Somewhere downstairs, a pianist played the same piece from the ceremony, though slower now. A peak, she said finally. Elias looked at her. A peak? Not because it was happy, because I could see everything from there. What I had survived, what I had mistaken for love, what I still had to protect, where I wanted to go next. He nodded. Her new peak. Vanessa smiled at the phrase. It sounded like a channel name, a headline, a promise made to women who had been told their devotion made them trapped. She looked down at her mother's bracelet. The diamonds were quiet in the winter light. Beautiful, yes, but no longer a symbol of what had been stolen. It was a reminder of what had been returned to its rightful place. Adrian had once believed 7 years of love meant Vanessa needed him. He had been wrong. 7 years had taught her patience. Betrayal had taught her precision. Leaving had taught her that dignity did not arrive when a man regretted losing her. It arrived when she stopped negotiating with the part of herself that already knew the truth. The bride kissing another man in front of him was never the end of the story. It was the moment Vanessa Hart finally stepped into a life where love did not require disappearance. And from that height, she did not look back. Subscribe for more stories from her new peak where quiet women rise, hidden power speaks, and betrayal finally meets consequences.